The sound of crying pierced through my Saturday morning routine like a blade through silk. I set down my coffee mug, the ceramic clattering against the granite countertop as I moved toward our front door. Through the frosted glass, I could make out a small bundle on our porch, a basket rocking gently in the autumn breeze. My heart hammered as I opened the door. There, swaddled in a pale yellow blanket, was a baby. Maybe 18 months old, with dark curls that caught the morning light and eyes the exact shade of hazel that stared back at me from the mirror every day. A folded piece of paper was tucked beside her tiny fist. "David," I called, my voice catching. "David, come here." I knelt beside the basket, my hands trembling as I unfolded the note. The handwriting was shaky. "Elderly, she belongs with you. Her adoptive parents, my son and daughter-in-law, died in a car accident last month. I've been searching for her real family. I know the truth about what happened at the Marsh Fertility Clinic. She deserves to be with her real mother." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Marsh Fertility Clinic, the place where my dreams had died 5 years ago. "Sarah, what's?" David's voice died mid-sentence as he appeared in the doorway. His face went chalk white, and he gripped the doorframe so hard his knuckles turned bone pale. "Oh God. Oh my God. David, look at her," I whispered, lifting the baby into my arms. She felt so right there, like a missing piece of my soul clicking into place. "She looks just like. Could it be our girl?" The words tumbled from his lips in a stutter I hadn't heard since our wedding day, when nerves had gotten the better of him. "Could it be Emma?" Something cold slithered down my spine, the way he said it, not with wonder but with terror. Not like a man hoping for a miracle, but like a man whose deepest secret had just crawled out of its grave. "What do you mean? Could it be?" I stood slowly, the baby settling against my chest as if she'd always belonged there. "David, Emma died. You were there. We buried." My voice cracked. "We buried an empty coffin." His face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought he might collapse. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago." The world tilted on its axis. 5 years of grief therapy. 5 years of David holding me while I sobbed into his shoulder, convinced that my body had failed us. 5 years of failed fertility treatments, of doctors telling me my hormone levels were unusual for someone who'd carried a child to term. 5 years of believing I was broken. "She didn't die, did she?" The words came out as barely a whisper, but they landed like thunder between us. "Our baby didn't die." David's silence was answer enough. I thought of all those nights I'd wake up reaching for a child who wasn't there, all those baby showers I'd avoided, all those times I'd stood in the cemetery staring at a headstone that bore our daughter's name, but held no body. The weight of realization crashed over me like a tsunami. "Where has she been, David?" My voice was steady now, deadly quiet. "Where has our daughter been for 5 years while I've been dying inside?" The baby, Emma, my Emma, made a soft cooing sound and reached up to touch my face with fingers that were unmistakably mine. In that moment, holding my living, breathing daughter while staring at my husband's guilty face, I felt something inside me fundamentally The woman who had spent 5 years blaming herself, who had twisted herself into knots trying to heal from a loss that was nothing but lies. That woman was dying, and something much more dangerous was being born in her place. "I can explain," David said, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Sarah, please, let me explain." I looked down at Emma, at her perfect little face, at the 5 years of her life that had been stolen from me. When I looked back up at David, I saw him flinch at whatever he found in my eyes. "Yes," I said softly, "I think you'd better." David's explanation came in fragments, like a confession torn from his throat piece by bloody piece. We sat in our living room, Emma sleeping peacefully in my arms, oblivious to the destruction of everything I thought I knew, while my husband of 8 years revealed himself to be a stranger. "The business was failing," he began, his hands shaking as he ran them through his hair. "You don't understand, Sarah. We were going to lose everything. The house, your career, our future. I was drowning in debt from bad investments, and I couldn't tell you because you were so excited about the baby, about our perfect life." I said nothing, just stared at him with the hollow feeling spreading through my chest like poison. "Helena, Dr. Marsh," she approached me a week before Emma was born. She said there were couples who would pay anything for a healthy newborn. She said it would solve all our problems. Helena, I tasted the name like acid. Your ex-girlfriend from medical school, the one who gave us the friends and family discount at her clinic. David flinched. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. She said she could arrange a private adoption, that the baby would go to a loving family who couldn't have children. She said you'd never have to know because you'd tell me our daughter was dead. The words came out flat, emotionless. Inside, I was screaming. The sedation during delivery that was planned. Helena said it would be easier if you weren't fully conscious. The adoptive parents were already at the clinic. The Weatherbys. He was a pharmaceutical executive, she was a federal judge. They couldn't have children, and they paid $200,000. $200,000. The price of my child. The price of my sanity. I found papers, I said quietly, the memory surfacing like a drowning body. Last week when I was looking for our tax documents in your office, medical records that didn't match what I remembered, payment receipts from accounts I didn't recognize. I dismissed them then, trusted him when he said they were old business documents. I almost asked you about them. David's face went gray. Sarah, the fertility treatments, I continued, my voice growing stronger. All those doctors telling me my hormone levels were wrong, that my body showed signs of having carried a pregnancy to term recently. You knew why I couldn't get pregnant again, didn't you? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Helena said the stress hormones from the loss might affect your fertility temporarily. She said she could help, run some tests, prescribe treatments that would keep me from getting pregnant. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She was giving me birth control disguised as fertility treatments, keeping me barren while I begged God for another child. Emma stirred in my arms, and I looked down at her perfect face. 5 years of birthdays missed, first words unheard, first steps unseen. 5 years of Christmas mornings with an empty nursery, of avoiding the baby section at stores, of friends carefully not mentioning their children around me. The Weatherbys died last month, David whispered. Car accident. Mrs. Weatherby's mother, she's the one who brought Emma back. She'd been suspicious about the adoption from the beginning, thought something wasn't right about the paperwork. When her son died, she hired a private investigator. I stood up slowly, Emma still sleeping against my shoulder. My legs felt unsteady, but my mind was crystallizing with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. So she knows, I said. The grandmother knows what you and Helena did. Sarah, please. Does Emma know her name is Emma, or did they call her something else for 5 years? David's silence was answer enough. What did they call my daughter, David? Sophie, he whispered. They called her Sophie, for 5 years. My Emma had been Sophie Weatherby, living in a mansion across town while I'd driven past the cemetery every week to visit an empty grave. While I'd spent thousands on therapy trying to heal from a loss that was nothing but lies built on greed and betrayal. I walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured neighborhood. Everything looked the same, the maple tree David had planted for our anniversary, the garden where I'd planned to teach Emma to grow flowers, the swing set we'd bought and never assembled, still in its box in the garage. But everything was different now. I was different. I'm taking Emma upstairs, I said, my voice calm as still water. We're going to have a nap. When I come back down, I want you to call Helena. Tell her you know that Emma is back, and that we need to meet. Sarah, what are you? I turned to look at him, and whatever he saw in my face made him take a step back. I'm going to destroy you, I said simply. Both of you. But first, I'm going to hold my daughter while she sleeps, and I'm going to plan exactly how to make you pay for every single day you stole from us. David opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in our marriage, he seemed to understand that his charming smile and smooth words wouldn't save him. As I carried Emma upstairs, I heard him fumbling for his phone behind me. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange suspended calm. To David, I became the grieving wife, slowly accepting a miracle, shocked, overwhelmed, but gradually warming to the idea of raising our returned daughter. I asked careful questions about Emma's adjustment, sought his advice on toddler-proofing the house, even suggested we see a family counselor to help us all heal together. David relaxed into this fiction like a man sinking into a warm bath. He began to believe his own narrative that he'd made a terrible mistake years ago, but now fate had given us a second chance. He started talking about putting the past behind us and focusing on our family's future. I let him believe it while I methodically dismantled his lie. The private investigator came recommended by my divorce attorney, a recommendation I'd sought during my lunch meetings with old college friends. Marcus Webb was a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes and had a particular hatred for corruption involving children. When I showed him the evidence I'd gathered from David's office, the real papers hidden behind false bottoms and file drawers, his jaw tightened in a way that told me he was personally invested. Your husband received payments totaling $200,000 over 6 months following your daughter's birth, Marcus reported during our clandestine meeting at a coffee shop downtown. The money was funneled through 3 shell companies, all traceable back to Marsh Fertility Clinic. Marsh has been running this operation for at least 8 years. We've identified 12 other families who lost children the same way. 12 other families, 12 other mothers who'd been told their babies died while those babies were sold to the highest bidder. The scope of Helena's operation made my stomach turn, but it also crystallized my resolve. I need more than just evidence, I told Marcus. I need a complete picture. Financial records, communication logs, client lists, everything. And I need it bulletproof. While Marcus worked his magic, I began phase 1 of my plan, David's financial destruction. As the marketing director for a major consulting firm, I had access to industry intelligence that David's struggling investment company desperately needed. For years, I'd been his secret weapon, sharing insights about upcoming mergers, market shifts, and client needs that kept his business afloat. Now I became his poison pill. I started small, mentioning that a major client was concerned about market volatility when they were actually expanding, suggesting he avoid certain investments that I knew would be profitable, recommending business partnerships with companies I knew were facing regulatory challenges. David trusted my judgment implicitly, never questioning my advice. Within 2 weeks, his company had lost 3 major clients and made 2 spectacularly bad investments. His business partner, Jeremy, started asking uncomfortable questions about David's recent decision-making. I encouraged David to double down, to invest more heavily in the failing ventures. You just need to be patient, I told him over dinner, bouncing Emma on my knee while she laughed at my silly faces. These things take time to pay off. Simultaneously, I began documenting everything. Hidden cameras in David's office captured his panicked phone calls to Helena. I recorded our conversations about Emma's miraculous return, building a library of admissions and slips of the tongue. Every piece of evidence was copied and stored in 3 separate locations. The meeting with Helena happened on a Tuesday evening at her clinic. I played the role perfectly, the overwhelmed mother, grateful but confused, desperate for answers about how to help Emma adjust. Helena Marsh was exactly what I'd expected. Elegant, cold, and utterly convinced of her own superiority. She sat behind her mahogany desk like a queen granting audience, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression one of practiced compassion. I understand this must be overwhelming, she said, her voice smooth as silk. But you have to understand, David was in a very difficult position 5 years ago. He was trying to protect your family's future. I just want to understand what happened, I said, letting my voice shake slightly. The records I have don't match what I remember from Emma's birth. Helena's eyes sharpened. What records? Just medical bills, insurance claims. Things that don't seem right. I fumbled in my purse, pulling out photocopies of the falsified documents. It says here that I had a successful delivery, but I thought, Miss Mitchell. Helena interrupted, reaching across the desk to take the papers. I think there's been some confusion. These are just administrative errors, nothing more. I watched her scan the documents, saw the moment she realized they were copies, not originals. Her composure cracked, just slightly. Where did you get these? From David's files, I said innocently. Should I not have them? Helena forced a smile. Of course not. I just want to make sure you're not dwelling on painful memories unnecessarily. Sometimes it's better to focus on the present, on the fact that Emma is home where she belongs. But I keep thinking about those 5 years, I pressed. About what Emma's life was like with the Weatherbys. Do you think she remembers them? Do you think she misses them? Something flickered in Helena's eyes, guilt, perhaps, or simply annoyance at having to maintain this charade. Children are resilient. She'll adjust. David mentioned that you helped arrange the adoption, I said carefully. That must have been heartbreaking for you, having to tell parents their baby died. Helena went very still. I'm not sure what David told you, but he said you were helping families who couldn't have children. That you were making sure unwanted babies found loving homes. I let tears well up in my eyes. It's actually beautiful in a way. making sure every child is wanted. The trap was set. Helena's relief was palpable as she leaned back in her chair. Exactly. That's exactly what we do here. We make sure every child finds their perfect family, even when the biological parents think the baby died. Helena's smile faltered. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. I had it. On tape, in her own words, Helena Marsh admitting to falsifying deaths and arranging illegal adoption. Marcus would be very pleased. As I left the clinic that evening, I felt the final pieces of my plan clicking into place. David's business was in free fall. Helena had incriminated herself. The evidence was mounting, but I wasn't finished. Not even that night, I tucked Emma into the crib we'd hastily assembled in what had once been our guest room. She looked up at me with those hazel eyes, my eyes, and whispered, "Mama?" It was the first time she'd called me that. The first time in 5 years I'd heard my daughter's voice saying the word I'd dreamed of hearing. I kissed her forehead and whispered back, "Yes, baby. Mama's here, and Mama's going to make sure the people who hurt us never hurt anyone else again." In the hallway, I could hear David on a hushed phone call with Helena, their voices tight with worry. They were starting to realize that something was wrong, that their careful house of cards was beginning to shake. They had no idea that I wasn't just shaking it. I was preparing to burn it to the ground. The first crack in David's facade appeared 3 weeks later during what should have been a routine Saturday morning. I was making pancakes for Emma. She'd developed an obsession with them shaped like butterflies. When David's phone rang, his face went white as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "What do you mean, an audit?" His voice pitched higher. "The medical board doesn't just randomly audit established clinics." I kept my expression neutral, focusing on flipping Emma's pancake while my heart raced with satisfaction. Marcus had been busy. Through his contacts at various regulatory agencies, he'd managed to trigger not just one audit but 3: medical board, insurance fraud division, and the IRS. Each inquiry had been carefully seeded with just enough anonymous tips to seem legitimate while avoiding any connection back to me. "Helena, calm down," David said, stepping into the hallway, but I could still hear every word. "What do you mean they're asking about adoption records? We destroyed those files years ago." "Not all of them," I thought, with grim satisfaction. Marcus had recovered dozens of documents from the clinic's supposedly secure disposal service. Amazing how much evidence people left behind when they thought they were untouchable. Over the following days, David's panic became impossible to hide. His business partner Jeremy called an emergency meeting after their biggest client abruptly terminated their contract. David came home looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. "I don't understand what's happening," he said, slumping into his desk chair while I pretended to sort through Emma's new clothes. "It's like everything's falling apart at once." "Maybe it's just bad timing," I suggested, folding a tiny pink dress. "These things happen in cycles, right?" But David wasn't listening. He was starting at his computer screen, his face growing paler by the minute. "Sarah, have you been in my office recently?" My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice level. "Just to get Emma's birth certificate for the pediatrician." "Why?" "Some files different. Moved around." I looked up with practiced concern. "Moved around? How? Do you think someone broke in?" David's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of suspicion. But then Emma toddled over and climbed into his lap and his expression softened. "No, I'm probably just paranoid. Everything's been so stressful lately." The paranoia wasn't unfounded. 3 days later, Helena called in a state of barely controlled panic. "They're asking about the Weatherby adoption specifically," she hissed into the phone. David had it on speaker, not realizing I was listening from the kitchen. "Someone gave them detailed financial records, David. Records that should have been destroyed." "What kind of records?" "Payment schedules, shell company transactions, bank transfer. Someone has been digging, and they know exactly what to look for." I smiled as I loaded the dishwasher. Marcus was worth every penny of his substantial fee. "We need to meet," Helena continued. "Tonight, there are things we need to discuss." "I can't leave Sarah and Emma." "Bring them," Helena snapped. "Actually, that might be better. We need to make sure we're all on the same page about what happened 5 years ago." That evening, as we drove to Helena's clinic for what David thought was an emergency strategy session, I felt the familiar calm that came before a perfectly executed plan reached its climax. Emma dozed in her car seat, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd adopted as her constant companion. The clinic after hours felt different, sterile and threatening in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Helena met us at the door, her usual composure cracked around the edges. Her perfect silver hair was slightly mussed, her makeup not quite as flawless as usual. "We have a problem," she said without preamble as we settled into her office. Someone is systematically destroying us. The audits, the investigation, David's business problems, this isn't coincidence. David shifted uncomfortably. You think someone knows about Emma? I think someone knows everything. Helena's eyes fixed on me. The question is who, and what they want. I bounced Emma gently on my knee, playing the part of the anxious wife. What are you talking about? What's there to know? Helena and David exchanged a look that lasted a beat too long. Sarah, David said carefully, we need to discuss some possibilities about Emma's situation. What about it? Helena leaned forward. Has anyone contacted you? Asked questions about Emma's birth, her time with the Weatherbees. Besides the grandmother who brought her back. No, I frowned convincingly. Should someone have? We're just being cautious, Helena said, but her eyes remained sharp. Sometimes people try to exploit situations like this, make false claims for money. What kind of false claims? Another look passed between them. David cleared his throat. Sarah, if someone were to suggest that Emma's adoption wasn't completely legitimate, that would be ridiculous. Right? You understand that everything we did was to protect her, to make sure she had the best possible life. The moment hung in the air like a sword. This was it, the point where they would either try to bring me into their conspiracy, or decide I was a threat that needed to be handled. I don't understand, I said, letting confusion color my voice. Are you saying someone is claiming Emma was adopted illegally? Helena's smile was razor sharp. What David is trying to say is that sometimes adoptions in unusual circumstances can be misinterpreted by people who don't understand the full situation. Unusual. Well, Helena continued, watching my face carefully, when a mother is heavily sedated during a traumatic delivery, her memories might not be entirely reliable. She might think she remembers things that didn't actually happen. The blood roared in my ears, but I kept my expression neutral. You're talking about me, aren't you? You're saying I don't remember Emma's birth correctly. David reached for my hand. Sarah, sweetheart, you were so sick during the delivery, the medications, the trauma. Are you telling me Emma didn't die? I let my voice rise slightly, adding just the right note of dawning horror. Are you telling me you lied to me for 5 years? Helena stood abruptly. Mrs. Mitchell, I think you're misunderstanding. Am I? I stood too, Emma still in my arm. Because it sounds like you're both trying to tell me that my daughter was given away while I was unconscious, and you let me believe she was dead. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see them both calculating, trying to decide how much truth I could handle, how much they could trust me with. Finally David spoke. Sarah, if that were true, hypothetically, you have to understand that it was done out of love, to protect you from an impossible choice. An impossible choice between keeping Emma and losing everything else. The house, your career, our future. We were drowning in debt, and the Weatherbees could give her opportunities we never could. They could. You sold her. The words came out flat, final. You sold our daughter. Helena stepped forward. Mrs. Mitchell, I understand you're upset, but you need to think about what's best for Emma now. She's home, she's safe, and dwelling on the past won't help anyone. Won't help anyone, or won't help you when the medical board finds out what you've been doing. Both of them went very still. What did you just say? Helena's voice was deadly quiet. I had pushed too far, revealed too much, but it was too late to pull back now. The war was in the open, I said. I repeated, meeting her gaze steadily, that it won't help you when the medical board finds out what you've been doing. To Emma, to the 12 other families, to all the mothers who think their babies died when you were really selling them to the highest bidder. David's face had gone gray. Sarah, how do I know? I smiled, and from their expressions it wasn't a pleasant sight. Because I know everything, David. I know about the shell companies, the payments, the falsified record. I know about the other families whose lives you destroyed for money. And I know that right now, investigators are going through Helena's files with a microscope. Helena lunged forward, her hand reaching for Emma. You little bitch, what have you done? I stepped back, shielding Emma with my body. I've done what any mother would do. I've protected my child and made sure the people who hurt her pay for what they did. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Helena snarled. There are people involved in this who will do anything to protect their interests. Anything. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Helena's mask had completely fallen away, revealing the predator underneath. You think you're so clever, but you're just a suburban housewife, playing games with people who've been manipulating the system for years. We have resources you can't imagine, connections you don't understand. David grabbed her arm. Helena, stop. No, she shook him off. She needs to understand what she's done. The people who adopted those children, they're not just wealthy, David. They're powerful. Judges, senators, pharmaceutical executives, people who can make problems disappear. Emma started to cry, sensing the tension in the room. I bounced her gently, keeping my voice calm despite the ice in my veins. Then I guess it's a good thing I have everything documented and stored safely, I said, because if anything happens to me or Emma, all of it goes public. Every record, every recording, every piece of evidence, all of it. Helena's face contorted with rage. You recorded us. I recorded everything. I looked at David, saw the betrayal in his eyes. Every conversation, every phone call, every meeting, including this one. I pulled my phone from my pocket, showing them the recording app that had been running since we'd arrived. You can't use that in court, David said desperately. It's illegal to record someone without consent. You're right, I agreed, but I can give it to journalists. I can post it online. I can make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of monsters you are. Helena was breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists. This isn't over. Yes, I said, walking toward the door with Emma in my arms. It is, because tomorrow morning, the FBI is going to arrest you both, and Emma and I are going to watch the news coverage over breakfast. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. Oh, and Helena, those connections you're so proud of, half of them are going down with you. Amazing how quickly powerful people turn on each other when their own freedom is at stake. The drive home was silent, except for Emma's contented babbling in the back seat. David sat rigid beside me, his world crumbling around him while mine finally began to make sense. But I knew this wasn't the end. Helena was right about one thing. There were dangerous people involved in this, people who wouldn't go down without a fight. The real battle was just beginning. The meeting was set for a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. in the same conference room where Helena had once convinced desperate parents to trust her with their most precious dreams. But this time, I had chosen the guest list. Helena thought she was calling the shots, summoning David and me for crisis management after a particularly damaging article appeared in the Metro Tribune. She had no idea that investigative journalist Rebecca Santos was already inside the building, hidden in the records room with her photographer. She didn't know that FBI agent Catherine Mills was monitoring everything from a van outside, waiting for my signal. And she certainly didn't know that 12 other families, the families of the stolen children, were gathered in the parking lot, ready to face the woman who had destroyed their lives. I arrived early, Emma safe at my sister's house, armed with a briefcase full of evidence and a heart full of 5 years' worth of rage. Helena was already there, pacing behind her desk like a caged predator. She'd clearly spent a sleepless night. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her hands shaking as she gripped her coffee cup. You have to stop this, she said without preamble. The FBI contacted my lawyer yesterday. Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done. I sat down calmly, placing my briefcase on the conference table. I've given 12 families the truth about their children. David arrived moments later, looking like a man walking to his execution. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes rumpled. Sarah, please, we need to talk about this rationally. Rationally? I stood, feeling the power of this moment coursing through me. You want to talk rationally about how you sold our daughter, about how you let me grieve for 5 years while she was living 10 miles away. I was protecting our family. Stop. My voice cut through his protests like a blade. Just stop lying, both of you, because in about 2 minutes, Agent Mills is going to walk through that door with arrest warrants, and your lies won't matter anymore. Helena's face went white. You're bluffing. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Financial records showing payments from 13 separate adoptions over 8 years, bank transfers totaling over $2 million, falsified death certificates, forged medical records. I slammed each document onto the table. Audio recordings of you admitting to arranging illegal adoptions. Video surveillance from this office showing you meeting with prospective buyers. Those recordings are inadmissible, in criminal court maybe, but not in the court of public opinion. I pulled out my phone and showed them the live stream that had been running since I'd entered the building. Say hello to the 5,000 people currently watching you squirm. David lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. Don't make this worse than it already is. You vindictive bitch, Helena snarled. You have no idea what you've unleashed. There are people who will what? Kill me? Make me disappear? I laughed, and the sound was cold even to my own ears. Helena, those powerful friends of yours, they're all scrambling to distance themselves from you right now. Senator Morrison withdrew his campaign contributions. Judge Blackwood recused herself from all adoption cases. Even your pharmaceutical executive friend, what was his name? Hendricks? He's already hired crisis management. The door opened and Rebecca Santos entered with her photographer in tow. Helena spun around, fury and panic warring on her face. This is a private meeting. Actually, I said, I invited Miss Santos. I thought the public deserved to hear directly from the woman who's been trafficking their children. I never trafficked anyone. Helena's composure finally cracked completely. These were legitimate adoptions, arranged for the benefit of children who would have grown up in poverty. Children whose mothers thought they were dead, Rebecca said, her recorder held high. Children who were torn from their families based on lies. Helena pointed a shaking finger at David. It was his idea. He came to me desperate for money, begging me to help him. I was trying to help both of them by sedating me during delivery so I wouldn't know my daughter was alive. I stepped closer, my voice rising. By giving me fake fertility treatments to keep me from getting pregnant again, by letting me spend 5 years in therapy thinking I was broken. You were better off not knowing, Helena screamed. You couldn't have given her what the Weatherbys could. You were living in a rental house, drowning in debt. That wasn't your choice to make. My voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried more weight than any scream. She was my daughter, my child, and you stole her from me. The room fell silent except for the soft whir of the photographer's camera. I want to know, I continued, my eyes fixed on Helena's face. If you ever once thought about me during those 5 years, if you ever wondered what it felt like to bury an empty coffin, if you ever considered what it was like for me to drive past playgrounds and nurseries, wondering what my daughter would have looked like at 2, at 3, at 4 years old. Helena's silence was answer enough. Miss Mitchell, David said quietly, I know you hate me, I know what I did was unforgivable, but please, think about Emma. She doesn't deserve to grow up knowing her father is in prison. I turned to him slowly. You're right. She doesn't deserve that. She also didn't deserve to spend the first 5 years of her life away from her mother, calling strangers mommy and daddy while I visited an empty grave every week. The door opened again, and Agent Mills entered with 2 other agents. The sight of their badges sent Helena stumbling backward. Helena Marsh, Agent Mills said, her voice crisp and professional. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, child trafficking and racketeering. David Mitchell, you're also under arrest as a co-conspirator. Wait, Helena gasped, looking wildly around the room. I can give you names. The people who bought the children, they're the real criminals. They knew the adoptions weren't legitimate. We'll add cooperation to the list of things your lawyer can discuss with the prosecutor, Agent Mills said, snapping handcuffs around Helena's wrist. As they led her away, Helena turned back to me one last time. You think this is justice? You've destroyed dozens of families. Those children were happy where they were. Some of them were, I agreed, but they deserve to know the truth. Their real families deserve to know they were alive. The room emptied quickly after that. David was led away in handcuffs, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Helena's screams echoed down the hallway until the elevator doors cut them off. Rebecca Santos was already on her phone with her editor, describing the scene for the evening news. I stood alone in the conference room where my nightmare had begun 5 years ago, surrounded by the scattered evidence of Helena's crimes. Through the window I could see the other families in the parking lot, some crying, some holding each other, all of them finally knowing the truth about their lost children. Agent Mills approached me quietly. Mrs. Mitchell, are you all right? I looked around the room one last time, at the place where my daughter had been stolen from me, where my grief had been manufactured, where my trust had been betrayed. Yes, I said, picking up my briefcase. I think I finally am. 6 months later, I sat in the garden behind our new house, a smaller place but one that Emma and I had chosen together, watching my daughter chase butterflies among the sunflowers we'd planted in spring. The morning news played softly from my phone. Helena Marsh was sentenced today to 15 years in federal prison for her role in an illegal adoption ring that separated 13 families from their children over 8 years. 15 years. It seemed both too much and too little for what she'd stolen from us. Emma ran over, her dark curls bouncing, clutching a dandelion she'd rescued from the grass. "Mama, look, it's fluffy, it's beautiful, sweetheart." I pulled her onto my lap, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, strawberry, her current favorite. 6 months of full-time motherhood, and I was still discovering her preferences, her habits, the way she hummed herself to sleep and insisted on arranging her stuffed animals in a perfect circle around her pillow. The custody hearing had been swift and decisive. David, facing a minimum of 8 years in federal prison, hadn't contested my petition for sole custody. His lawyer had advised cooperation in hopes of a reduced sentence, a calculation that felt grimly appropriate for a man who'd always viewed relationships as transactions. The divorce settlement had been substantial, though no amount of money could restore what had been taken. I'd used part of it to establish a foundation for families affected by illegal adoptions, with Marcus Webb as the lead investigator. The rest went into Emma's college fund and our quiet new life. "Mama, why are you sad?" Emma's small hand touched my cheek, her intuition sharp as always. "I'm not sad, baby. I'm thinking about Daddy David." I paused, considering my words carefully. Emma's therapist, Sarah Chen, a woman I'd vetted extensively, had helped us navigate the complicated truth about David's role in her life. Emma knew he'd made big mistakes and couldn't live with us anymore, but the full scope of his betrayal would wait until she was older. "A little," I admit. "Do you miss him?" Emma considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could bring to complex emotions. "Sometimes, but mostly I'm happy with just us." "Me too." The Weatherby investigation had revealed that they'd known the adoption was questionable, but had convinced themselves they were rescuing Emma from poverty. Their estate had settled with all 13 families, creating trust funds for the children and funding for family reunification services. Emma's trust fund would ensure her future was secure, regardless of what happened to me. Other families had found closure too. The Petersons had been reunited with their son, now 7, who they'd believed had died of The Garcias had discovered their twin daughters, sold separately to different families, had been living in the same city for 6 years. Not all the stories had happy endings. Some children had died in the intervening years. Some adoptive families had moved overseas beyond reach, but 13 families finally knew the truth. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca Santos. Helena's appeal was denied. She'll serve the full sentence. I felt a quiet satisfaction, but not the triumph I'd expected. The months since the trial had taught me something I hadn't anticipated. Revenge, even justified revenge, couldn't give me back Emma's first steps, her first words, the 5 Christmases we'd spent apart. Justice could be served, but time couldn't be recovered. "Mama, can we plant more flowers tomorrow?" Emma's voice brought me back to the present. "What kind of flowers?" "Purple ones, and yellow ones, and maybe some red ones too." I laughed, the sound surprising me with its genuineness. "That sounds like a rainbow garden." "Yeah, a rainbow garden for us." As evening approached, we moved inside for dinner and bath time and stories. Emma had developed a love for books about brave girls who solved problems, a preference that both amused and concerned me. During story time, she often asked about the bad lady who took babies and seemed satisfied when I told her the bad lady couldn't hurt anyone anymore. That night, after Emma fell asleep, clutching her elephant and humming softly, I stood in her doorway and watched her peaceful face in the nightlight's glow. She was healing beautifully, adapting to being Emma Mitchell, instead of Sophie Weatherby, with the resilience that children possess in abundance. But sometimes I caught her staring at nothing, and I wondered what memories lingered from her early years, what questions would surface as she grew older. The therapist assured me that children were remarkably adaptable, that Emma's sense of security with me was growing stronger every day. I'd changed too in ways I was still discovering. The woman who'd spent 5 years drowning in undeserved guilt had been replaced by someone harder, more strategic, but also more purposeful. I'd learned I was capable of systematic destruction when protecting my child. It was a knowledge that both frightened and empowered me. The foundation I'd started was growing, helping other families navigate the complex legal and emotional terrain of recovering stolen children. Marcus had become not just an employee but a friend, someone who understood the particular kind of justice that comes from protecting the innocent by destroying the guilty. David wrote to me sometimes from federal prison, letters I read once and then burned. His words were always the same: Apologies, explanations, pleas for forgiveness for Emma's sake. I felt nothing reading them except a distant pity for the man who'd traded his daughter's love for money and found himself with me. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the strange turn my life had taken. A year ago, I'd been a woman defined by loss, hollow with grief for a child I believed was dead. Now I was a mother again, building a new life with my daughter while helping other families reclaim their stolen children. The revenge had been complete, the justice served, but the real victory was smaller and more precious. Emma's laughter in our rainbow garden, her small hand in mine, her voice calling me, Mama, as if she'd never called anyone else by that name. Some nights I still dreamed of the 5 years we'd lost, but increasingly I dreamed of the years we had ahead of us. Years of butterfly hunts, and bedtime stories of scraped knees and school plays, of all the ordinary moments that make up a life together. In the end, perhaps that was what justice really looked like. Not the destruction of those who'd wronged us, but the patient reconstruction of what they'd tried to take away. Emma was home, we were both home, and that was enough.